Welcome to Body of Light, episode 11, featuring Ashana. Ashana is a performer, a sound healer, an artist, and a teacher. Ashana is greatly known for her sound healing, specifically with her voice and crystal singing bowls. I feel she is a true master of her craft and her art and her offering. The main reason I wanted to interview Ashana for this Body of Light project is to pose the question, how does sound, especially when we're using sound, our voice or an instrument in a sacred and mindful way, how does that relate to creating a light body or having a light body or rainbow body, life or death experience? How does sound, vibration play into the creation of the light body, the dissolving of the body at the time of death? And because she has such great knowledge and experience with sound and using sound in a sacred way, I thought it would be wonderful to reach out to her and see if she'd be open to doing this interview and being a part of this project. And she has, and it turned out to be really, really spectacular. In this episode, we discuss how sacred sound relates to healing trauma and spiritual development and awakening, how sound healing and sacred sound instruments can help us connect deeper with our multidimensional being and self. How does sacred sound and sacred sound instruments relate to creating a light body? How does one living in the Western world create a light body and experience their own unique spiritual development and awakening while being a parent, a husband, entrepreneur, living in the world? How does one create their own unique expression of their soul authentically without leaving the world, without leaving the life that they want and that they desire? We talk about the similarities that all the different spiritual masters who have attained rainbow body or light body, what do they all have in common? What can we learn from them? And can Western people engaged in the Western world experience the same level of mastery as them, as the people that we consider ascended masters, as the beings that have a fully developed light body or have a rainbow body death experience? This is really my main focus at this point in the project, was how can us as Westerners embody and live and express the same level of mastery as these beings that we call ascended masters, these yogis, these saints? How can we embody that same amount of love and compassion and clarity and service? How can we do that while still living in this culture, in this world, without having to go on all the retreats and do all the different practices that are tailored for Eastern culture, Eastern people, coming from these different meditation enlightenment cultures? How can we find our own way as Westerners to experience these same results that these meditation cultures of the East do experience? What is our way as Westerners? That was really my main focus at this point of the project. So I thought Ashana would be wonderful to ask these questions to. And it just so happens that she knows someone who is a Westerner, an American, living a Western life on the spiritual path, who she feels embodies the same qualities, attributes as these master beings that we are talking about. And she gives this example and talks about this person that she personally knows. So this and much more we talk about in episode 11. So please enjoy Ashana.
One of my main intents for wanting to interview you for this subject is, as a fellow sacred sound practitioner myself, I wanted to get someone a little more seasoned and masterful than me to get your perspective on how sacred sound, in your case, we have specifically the crystal bowls and in your voice, and you play some other instruments. How does sacred sound apply to spiritual awakening, to healing, and possibly to activating what the Tibetans call the rainbow body or our light body, and really what that is? We can go deeper into that. But how about we start of how sacred sound has specifically changed your life around healing, whether that's healing from trauma or an injury or what have you? And then how has it brought you to who you are now?
I'm so glad you opened up the space and began talking about aspects of healing and not just throughout the word healing. Because I feel like it's so significant to know what we mean when we say healing. Healing is a return to wholeness, and sound is all about coming back into harmony, literally. And trauma, specifically, trauma, it can be a root of all illness, all disease, all suffering, degrees of trauma that the human condition, the human organism, the human consciousness experiences. And so working with our trauma is probably the thing that most of us spend most of our lives doing, recovering from childhood trauma. And by this, I don't mean, the big trauma, like the big events, but, as the work of Gabor Mate talks about, those small traumas that we experience, being part of our culture and raised by parents who they themselves have gone through their own experiences. So it turns into, layer upon layer of generational trauma that happens. And we look at sound as a way of mitigating the stress, the anxiety that is a result of our conditioned and uh, reactive, how we react to trauma, and how we live out the patterns of trauma, illness, disease, suffering in our lives. On one aspect, we look at sound to mitigate that by reducing stress, relaxing the body, relaxing the mind, taking us into different states of consciousness so that the mind can literally step out and step away from the pain, step away from the repetitive thinking of the busy mind, and just move back into this more spaciousness so it can breathe again, so we can breathe again, and the body actually can begin to relax, from the repetitive thinking of our minds. There's like a lot of insane stuff that goes inside of our thinking mind over and over and over again that holds conditions in place. And so when we bring sound and vibrational healing, but specifically we're talking about sound, the sound of an instrument, the sound of a voice, the harmonics created by that, the enharmonics created by that. We give the physiognomy, the physical, and we're here in the physical, first and foremost. We're in a body. We are light beings, but we are in a body. And we give that body a chance to open, to relax, and to hopefully receive. Now, that's like the doorway in. That's like, in some ways, that's step one. And that's the place where a lot of people, sound healing lands in that place. And we say how wonderful this sound is. That's where the initial experience of sound healing lands, is in that space of, oh, I just want to relax. I want to go into bliss. I want to go into peace. I want to quiet my mind. I want to soothe my pain. And indeed, that's definitely a significant and very important part of sound healing. Another aspect of it that is incredibly powerful is the entrainment that we can begin to experience, depending on our level of receptivity, to ourselves as multidimensional beings. and we go into, we are literally attuned to, depending on really, I think, depending on the instrument in some ways, depending on the intention, the consciousness of the player, the environment, we have this opportunity to shift into different states of conscious awareness that we're not even aware of them in our everyday waking state. And the more I sit with healing work, and the more I sit with sound, the more I understand that healing is a multidimensional process. We are healing from, we're essentially, we're healing in a multiverse, I think. I don't know if I can say that, but uh, I'm beginning to more and more believe that this is what happens. You know, we work on the physical form, we relax, we open, we release tensions, we take herbal supplements, we take medications, we work on the body, we work on the mind, we work on the psychological component of healing. And then when we open up to certain frequencies of sound, and it could come through mantra, can come through crystal bowls, can come through didgeridoos, can come through drumming, come through harps. Those help us access different states of conscious awareness. Perhaps, you know, some might take you back in time. And of course, in the quantum field, really, there is no time. It's just this big holographic now. So it will take us, let's just say, attune us or retune us to states of being that we may have experienced as a soul or as soul consciousness. It could be, I go back to Egypt, I could go back to some other lifetime, and the sound can literally evoke and bring forward those experiences, bring forward those learning, bring forward those states of consciousness, bring forward that awareness just by triggering us back into that state of awareness. And then there are the, you know, the frequencies of the crystal singing bowls. I can attest to because I play them so often. That brings us into this pure tone frequency. You know, they're basically vibratoless, and the tones of the bowls are singular and pure, and they have a vast array of harmonics. So they bring us into this state of very still yet incredibly expanded awareness. And when we go into that state, we can access, we have the opportunity to access through the stillness, through the expansion, of the stillness and the quiet and the silence, we can touch in to our higher selves, to our souls, to layers of awareness that we're not even aware that we could be aware of. And that is what happens for me playing bowls. And then when we do that, what we learn in those spaces can come in and inform, affect, really. I'm just feeling it. It's like it affects us in our physical now reality that we're dealing with more in the 3D reality of, oh, you know, I'm working through such and such an illness, I'm working through such and such a mental trauma. We've stepped out of that, and we've gone into a much more vast place with a higher perspective of awareness, and then we can see connections that we may never have understood before, or the body can breathe now inside the spaciousness, and energies that were congested or compromised or out of attunement, out of alignment, can realign themselves with some very elegant simplicity. And that being said, I feel like it's so important that we address all of these aspects. We can't do it simultaneously, but as part of a whole. I have never been one to say sound healing is the be all and end all of all healing. I do not I do not believe that, because we are multidimensional beings. We must heal in different ways. So to address the psychological is so important. To address the physical is so important, and to address that, that more multidimensional, to address the frequency aspect of it in terms of how sound activates that. They're all important, and they all contribute. They're all part of this beautiful, multi-dimensional, organic flow of wholeness that supports and creates healing for the individual, and hopefully on a collective scale as well.
You mentioned entrainment, like the entrainment of the mind that happens when someone is playing, or especially receiving a sound healing. Can you talk a little bit more on what you know is actually happening?
What I do know is that in entrainment, and this is true, just to kind of correct your understanding of it, if you'll excuse me, it's not just the receiver, but it is the facilitator, the practitioner as well. Okay, so, but the practitioner has a responsibility, because they are playing the instrument, to direct and lead, be responsible for the consciousness of the sound itself. Okay, and when I say the consciousness of the sound itself, that is a direct influence on what the quality of the vibration of the sound. So the consciousness of the player has a direct effect on the vibration of the sound. And the sound itself that is emitted from the instrument has a direct impact on the player. Okay, so that's why you can sit down and say, oh, I'm going to take my bowl, I'm going to sit down and play. And your mind is like, you're a little bit scattered. And you play for like a minute or 2 minutes. And now you're coming in sync. Now, why are you coming in sync? Because you are entraining to the sound of the bowl or the instrument, the bowl, the harp, the didge, the gong, the drum, the flute, the violin, the piano, whatever it is you're playing. You're in training to that. Whatever sound becomes the dominant sound in the environment directly affects the vibrational frequency of everything around it. And so what happens inside of that experience is that everything else that is the non-dominant sound shifts in vibrational frequency to align with the dominant sound. That is entrainment. So what I believe to be happening at that point in time is that literally our neural synapses and our nervous system begins to fire with more regularity, and it becomes attuned and in coherence with the vibrations of the dominant instrument. So it shifts our brain waves. Eventually, our brain waves shift depending on the frequency that is the dominant frequency. So they can either go chaotic, if you're in an environment where the dominant sound is like really, really, really loud music, and it's techno pop blaring, then your brain waves are going to be directly affected by that, and you're going to have an experience either of agitation or discomfort or compensation or pure enjoyment and exhilaration because you love that and it's really stimulating, the endorphins inside of you. Like, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. When I get into an environment like that, I go, oh my God, this is like the worst thing I can imagine. So, but because it depends on our proclivities, what is it that feels right to our bodies and in alignment for us. And again, what's the intention? So when we move into an environment where the dominant sound holds an intention, holds the frequency of healing, and by healing I mean wholeness, coherence, alignment with big S, big self, and higher source. When that becomes the dominant vibration, and the instrument or instruments are supporting that intention. And so the player is creating an environment in a sound healing concert or a sound bath, or just the simplicity of sitting by yourself, playing a bowl, playing a guitar, chanting, singing. Those vibrations become the dominant vibration, and we move the body, physiognomy, the nervous system moves into coherence. And the heart becomes heart coherent, and then we have nervous system, brain coherence as well. You play long enough, and you can access very, very deep states of consciousness that way.
I've heard Richard Rudis, my teacher, is called he's called sacred sound instruments, whether it's the bowls or the gong in his case, an amplifier of the intention of the energy of the player of said instrument. Would you agree with that? It sounds like that's
I totally
what you're saying.
Especially, you have to remember that crystal singing bowls, the nature of pure quartz crystal is to amplify, transmit, store, contain, absorb, transmute, transform energy. So, the number one with pure quartz crystal is to amplify energy. Now, the body is crystalline in its matrix. The fluids in the body have a crystalline matrix to them. Our skeletal system is like one big crazy antenna in terms of the crystalline matrix of the skeletal cells. So, and then we have, little parts in our brain that said in the pineal gland that are crystalline in their nature. So, we are amplifiers of energy as humans. We walk around amplifying, transmitting energy. We know this. And if we look at vibrational healing, we know that human beings are transmitters of energy. We transmit energy, we store energy, we amplify energy, we can change energy, qualities of energies. So, we could, in a bigger sense of the word, say, we're kind of walking crystal energy amplifiers. And when we are playing an instrument, and of course, this is where the bowls just come in, because there's such an organic resonance with us as humans. When we bring that together, I always say this to my students, we are, the relationships between you and the bowl. And that's the relationship right there. Okay. So we are working in tandem to amplify those intentions. The more you work with your instruments, the deeper that relationship becomes. And the more seasoned that relationship is, the more juju I feel.
So let's connect some of this to the Tibetan rainbow body, because that's a big piece of what I'm doing, is making this documentary about the Tibetan rainbow body, and specifically asking the question and framing questions around this main question. Is it possible for people who are on a spiritual path, like say you and I, are living in the Western world, living a life of whatever that means, to be spiritual to them, being the best person they can be, working on their healing, working on whatever it is to become a more awake, aware, compassionate, loving human being, and the totality of that. So someone on that path, can we experience, say, the same levels of love, clarity, connection to source as these beings that are having these rainbow body death experiences, the monks, the nuns, the sadhus, the ascetics that are in India, Tibet, Nepal, and all around the world, because this is not just Tibetan. This is something that has been experienced in many, almost all spiritual traditions, of the body dissolving into light. Is it possible for people engaged in Western affairs, living life, driving cars, paying bills, engaged in the duality that is all around us, can we reach that same level of, for lack of a better word, like spiritual enlightenment, awareness, love? And if we can, how do we do that? And if we can't, why not? So if we can, because I believe we can, and how does our instruments and sound relate to that process? So my question would be, using your intention and using an instrument with an intention to activate the light body, to become more aligned with source. Is it possible do you think it's possible to attain that type of realization using instruments, using sacred sound?
I think it's possible to do that with or without sound. I don't think that the sound is necessarily the factor in creating that experience. The main
Right.
piece of this that I think is important to understand, because you asked the way the nuns and the way the monks did and the way the sadhus do. Well, what is it? First, we have to look and say, well, what is it that they do, that they are doing, that allows them to have that experience? And more important,
Yes.
why would I want that experience? Because in order to have that experience, I've got to be really committed. Yeah, my motivation has got to be such that there's got to be a really big why for me to put my energy, my effort, my attention, my desire, and to harness all the energy around my desire to create that. Do I create it just as an experience of phenomena, or am I wanting to create that because it is part of my soul's desire to have such an experience? And if that is the truth, if it is a soul's desire, then one of the things that those monks, those nuns, those sadhus, those swamis that have been having those rainbow experiences, those teachers, the mentors that have them, they focus their energy in that direction. So they take their time, they take their energy, they take their intention, they learn, they grow. It becomes important to them to have or to direct their attention and their energy to achieving, experiencing, cultivating states of conscious unconditional love, states of being light, states of moving into what Hindus would call moksha, freedom. Okay, they're moving into, why do I want that? Why is that important to me to do that? As a householder, as somebody who's wrapped up in in my everyday life, making money, doing, taking care of my children, creating a business, working on a business, working, taking care of my family. These are very, very important things. But how important to me is is spiritual evolution and cultivating qualities of charity, of unconditional love, of inner peace, of kindness, you know? And when being light and freedom becomes this tangible desire that is so significant, it's pointing like a north star to you. You can taste it, you feel it, you want it. It's not even just meaningful, it's a hunger. It's a soul level hunger that wants to be experienced, because to not be love is so uncomfortably undesirable. So there, to be love and to be light and to transmute and transform that which is in us with that awareness, and that becomes the desire, then of course we can access those places. There's no question of that. And can sound facilitate that with us? Absolutely. Mantra, the actual specific chanting of mantra, creates sacred geometrical patterns in our energy field that, just as we were talking about entrainment, that literally begin to entrain us to what that vibration feels like. Specific mantras are understood to do specific things, specific qualities of being. You know, it's not as simple as I am peace, I am peace, although that's a brilliant mantra, right? But I'm talking about more complex and sophisticated chanting that actually activates geometrical patterns of vibration within us to organize our energy field so that we have and begin to understand and experience or re-experience as the soul what we know as those states of conscious awareness. And of course, the crystal bowls, again, because we're talking about rainbow body, we're talking about light body, you know, the crystal bowls are remarkable for this, because when held in intention and inside that pure tone sound frequency that is so structured as crystal itself, you know, we can move into a place where the mind can become so still that we can feel the possibility of the organism and the energy field transmuting and transforming into light. I mean, I know this because I've had that experience many times, many times.
They're another tool, just like mantra.
Exactly. And so are harps, so are gongs, so's a violin, so's a cello, so's piano, so's a guitar. You know, you can't diminish the great composers that sat down with the instruments that were available to them in their moment, bringing through, you know, experiences from the multiverse into sound. So we can, you know, think about Gustav Holst's planets, think about Mozart, think about the consciousness of the mind of Bach. You know, I mean, I give my whole crown just like when I even think about it. You know, that is an access to the exquisiteness of of sacred geometry being experienced through organized sound. It's breathtaking. You know, so it's not just playing a crystal bowl. I mean, it's really, you know, healing music is everywhere. And it's been going on since the dawn of time.
And all around in nature, like right now, I'm listening to all the birds.
Yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes.
The elements, the fire crackling, the water flowing. It's
Yeah,
everywhere.
it is. Because it's just vibration.
Yeah. So there's some characteristics of these. I call them masters just because they've mastered something. The rainbow body, from my experience from interviewing 12 people, experts now, is that it's a learnable skill. This rainbow body death experience is a learnable skill. There's actually a rainbow body academy in Tibet, part of the Dzogchen lineage. This is something you can learn. But what I've done is I've looked at the different people who have had this experience, who have either shrunken or dissolved into light, or had some sort of siddhi-like death experience, whether it's tukdom, where the body sits upright after in a meditational state after they die, or what have you. I look at these beings, how they lived, and the different characteristics that they all have in common
Mm.
of not just their spiritual practice, but how did they live? Like, were they and what I found out is that they were unbelievably selfless, so in complete service to their students, to humanity, unconditional love, childlike playfulness. And it seemed from the people that know them that they were in this state of like complete non-duality. There was no difference between the man, the woman, the ant, the air, everything was God. They were seeing everything, really experiencing that, not just knowing it, but living it. So this comes back to my question. Do you feel that people living in the West, like us, can get to that same level of mastery?
Of course. Anybody could do that. That it's not limited. But again, I'll go back and I'll say what I said before, you know, is that it depends on your desire. Do you want that? If so, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Always.
One reason I ask is that there's been no cases or reports that I have found of people engaged in Western affairs and Western life having a rainbow body death type experience. And there's a lot less, it seems, people who are recognized of holding, the saints, the sadhus that are so much more in the culture of India, in Nepal, and Tibet. You mentioned in our first talk that you know someone.
I do.
And can you talk about that person and why you say that they would be this same type of quality of being?
What is about her?
Yeah, like why would you say she would be equal to these monks or nuns or what have you? She's an
Oh,
American. She lives in our world.
she's American. She has done in-depth studies of training in various indigenous healing modalities. She is a master of what is called light language. She can produce sacred ash vibhuti. She's probably the most loving human I know. She exudes joy and playfulness. She's authentic. I have watched her do major healings on other humans. She understands psychic surgery. So I've seen that with my own eyes. She's 10 years younger than me, and she's made it a life focus to be to continuously evolve and develop her own consciousness, and her connection with her own soul is profound, and it's the leading and guiding force in her life.
Does she live involved in the world, or is she a hermit? Does she live in a house in the city? Like,
Healer. I could give you our website and you can go make an appointment. You know, I, I've traveled with her. She's been my spiritual teacher for many, many, many years. And, she's exquisite, very real, very human. I've, watched her make breakfast, and I've eaten many, 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 many meals together where I know that the juju that's going in the meal is totally different. So, you know how we get when we well, at least I did, and maybe it's not true for you, but all wrapped up on my diet, having to look a certain way, and eating like, oh, I don't do this, I don't eat this food, I don't eat that food, I'm eating only this right now. And when I go to her house and sit, I eat anything she puts on my plate, and it all goes down like butter. There's so much love, there's so much juju in the food that I have to stop myself because I'm full, but
The
yeah.
same like the stories of saints when they have prasad and they eat the food and say it's this greasy thing, but they eat it and it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's just like that.
So
Just like
you, so what do you think the main ingredient is of? Is it you said love over and over again? Is it
unconditional love. Absolutely. I mean, I feel very privileged to know her because I've watched her grow and evolve. I've watched her be a work in progress. She is a work in progress. She's still a work in progress, and she makes no bones about it. But, and at the same time, I'm talking to somebody that has those experiences that you're talking about, that is ever growing and looking and reflecting on her, where she is inside of herself. There's no shame. There's no guilt. There's awareness and understanding and reflection and honesty and authenticity and immense gratitude, immense love, immense generosity of spirit, immense joy. It's like, I know if I text, to say da 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 da. It's like, let's get you a text. So, like the other day, like last week, my husband was in the hospital for a week, right? So I wrote, I, I wrote and said, he's out, right? And I get that. Or I'll get something else, with, that looks
that's
like
very that's very Western, very American.
that, right? But you got to understand, it's not the sticker. It's the energy behind the sticker that's coming out my phone that goes like this. It reaches my heart, it reaches my soul, and it just lands in me like a light. And so yeah, I mean, my husband has sat with the monks from Dharamsala, with the Rinpoches, and the love is immense. So it is this. It's the oneness. It's that someone, a being who has really done the work. And I mean the inner work, the inner reflection, the inner understanding, and has come to a place inside of themselves where they are in love and they are love. And so love has landed in them like some, and blossomed in them as a tangible state of being, for so many of us, and I include myself, it's like love comes and it goes and it comes and it goes and it comes and it goes. We taste it and we go, oh my God. I actually wrote a song on that, and I'm going to record it one day. um, I wrote this song. It said, I walk with love, I walk away, I turn back and swear I'll stay. Every moment of each day is a time to remember. And these are beings that they're not walking away anymore. It's like I'm there, I'm there, I'm there, I'm there, I'm there. The body, the mind, the spirit has been brought into such a state of connection and alignment with source and with love. It is anchored in. And that is something we all can learn. And that is the promise of all spirituality in its essence form. Whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Buddhist, whether you're, a Hindu, whether you're an indigenous healer, doesn't matter. We land right in the arms of love, and we let go, we relax, we make our home there. You say, I moved in for life.
And the bowls and the sound can be tools to help us to find that home.
Totally. Because we have so much. What Saima Lakshmi Devi, she says this a lot. She goes, we have so much caca, right? Stuff, right? We get fixated on, and we hang on to that stuff, and we focus on it. And so it is so helpful to have the blessing and the benefit of healing sound that allows us to, it literally can take the caca, can take the stuff and just minimize it, dissolve it. So it just kind of cleanses out of our field. It's like we take the sonic scrub brush and we go, okay, here we go. I'm gonna do the Etch-a-Sketch thing, baby, with my brain. And take it out. And the vibration is clears. And we go, wow, I feel amazing. Well, of course you feel amazing after, depending on the sound healer and the sound healing experience, because it doesn't happen all the time, but it certainly does happen a lot. So we feel amazing because, all of that static energy, all of that caca, right, has been cleansed, cleared, and removed. It's not in our field anymore. We're like, ah. And then we walk away. We go, that's possible. I'm going to do that again and again and again and again. And we become entrained to that vibration and to the clarity of that space. And the more clear we become, the deeper our willingness, I believe, to ask the relevant questions of our soul. What do I need to do next? What's going to help me most? Or we get this insight, it's probably time to leave that relationship. Or, how can I do this differently? Or what's next on my path? What's the next step? And the next step might be going out and sitting under the tree, So this is what sound does. It reorganizes us and it brings us into beautiful states. It can bring us into beautiful states of coherence. Coherence so we can hear the voice of our soul speaking to us. And we can feel the presence of love that is there all the time in those moments. And then we get to make choices on the next step.
Empty. There ain't nobody. Illusory, transform to rainbow body. Clear light shining, calmly abiding. Great perfection, rainbow body.